There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with being the last one left. Your mates are claimed and married with kids. But then just one person is off the mark, facing rejections, or probably hoping for one day. Not the last person. The world was full of people, bustling and alive and finding each other with the ease that had always eluded Mira Ashford. No, she was the last one in her circle still unmated. The last single wolf in a pack that had long since paired off and moved forward into the life she'd been promised since childhood but never quite reached. Welcome to Ken's Romance Stories. Tell me where you are watching from, and I'll send you a goodwill message. Do well to like, share, and subscribe. At 53 years old, Mira had learned to make peace with solitude. The Riverside Pack's community center hummed with the familiar chaos of the monthly gathering. Pups chasing each other between tables, mated pairs moving in synchronized harmony that spoke of years together, elderly wolves dispensing wisdom from their corner seats. Mira stood at the refreshment table, arranging cookies she'd baked that morning, and practiced the smile that said, "I'm fine, really, completely content with my life asterisk, even though the truth was far more complicated. She was fine. Mostly. She'd built a good life from the pieces of the future she'd expected. Her bookstore in downtown Riverside was thriving, a cozy refuge filled with worn paperbacks and the scent of coffee from the cafe corner she'd added 5 years ago. She had friends, hobbies, a garden that produced more tomatoes than one person could reasonably eat. She volunteered at the Pack School, served on 3 different committees, and had become the unofficial aunt to everyone's children. It was a full life, a meaningful life. It just wasn't the life she'd dreamed of at 23 when her wolf had whispered promises about destiny and fated mates and the soul-deep recognition that would make everything make sense. 30 years. 3 decades of waiting for a mate bond that never materialized. Of watching friends find their matches while she smiled and planned their celebrations. Of enduring well-meaning setups and blind dates and the gradually dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, the moon goddess had simply forgotten about her. Mira, dear, these cookies are divine. Eleanor Chen, the pack's eldest member at 97, patted her hand with fingers that had grown gnarled with age. Your grandmother's recipe? With a few modifications, Mira replied, grateful for the distraction. I added cardamom this time. Delicious innovation. Eleanor's sharp eyes, still bright despite her years, studied Mira with the unsettling perception that came with a near century of reading people. You're looking tired, child. Have you been sleeping? Well enough. A lie. Mira had been waking at 3 a.m. for the past month. Her wolf restless and anxious in a way she couldn't explain. Some primal instinct insisting something was coming, something important. But after 30 years of false hope, Mira had learned to ignore those whispers. Just busy with inventory at the store. Eleanor hummed skeptically but was pulled away by her great-grandson before she could press further. Mira returned to arranging cookies with unnecessary precision, aware of the conversations happening around her in fragments. So grateful to finally find him, you know. I'd almost given up at 35. The mate bond is worth the wait, trust me. Can't imagine life without her now. Each overheard snippet was a small cut, barely noticeable individually, but accumulating into something that ached. She was happy for them. Genuinely. She'd planned half these weddings, thrown most of these baby showers, celebrated each joy with authentic warmth. But God, she was tired. Tired of being the exception. Tired of the pitying looks. Tired of younger wolves finding their mates while she remained alone. Tired of her own hope, which refused to die completely, despite 3 decades of evidence that her story might not include this particular chapter. Aunt Mira. 7-year-old Sophie Martinez crashed into her legs with the full-body enthusiasm only children possessed. Did you bring the chocolate ones? Please say you brought the chocolate ones. Would I ever forget? Mira produced a tin of double chocolate cookies from beneath the table, reserved specifically for her favorite nibblings, the collective term she'd coined for the pack children who'd adopted her as honorary aunt. Sophie's squeal of delight drew 3 more children. And suddenly Mira was surrounded by small bodies and sticky hands and questions about everything from cookie recipes to whether wolves could fly if they jumped from high enough. No, and please don't test that theory. This, at least, never got old. The children didn't care that she was unmated. To them, she was just Aunt Mira, who always had cookies and told the best stories and never talked down to them. Is it true you're really, really, really old? Tommy Blackwood asked with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. Thomas? His mother, Jessica, looked mortified. We don't ask people that. It's fine, Mira laughed, the sound genuine this time. I am really, really old, practically ancient. But you don't look like Grandma Eleanor, Sophie observed thoughtfully. You look like my mom, but with silver bits in your hair. The silver bits are distinguished, Mira informed her solemnly. They mean I've earned wisdom through experience. What kind of experience? The kind that teaches you to always bake extra cookies because children have hollow legs. The kids laughed, and Mira felt the familiar warmth that came from being useful, being loved, even if it wasn't the specific love she'd once dreamed of. The gathering continued around her. Alpha Marcus Kane made his monthly address. Updates about territory borders, the successful negotiation with the neighboring pack, upcoming events. His mate, Luna Sarah, stood beside him with their toddler on her hip, the picture of partnership and belonging. Mira listened with half her attention while helping the children construct an elaborate fortress from folding chairs and tablecloths. She'd become an expert at existing in spaces without being central to them, at contributing without taking up too much room, and at being present while remaining somehow invisible to the deeper currents of pack life. After the official business concluded, the gathering dissolved into socialization. Mira was preparing to slip out early. She'd done her duty, shown her face, proved she was fine, when Marcus approached with an expression that made her wolf sit up and take notice. Mira, could I speak with you privately? Her stomach dropped. Private conversations with the alpha were rarely social. Of course. They moved to his office, a small room off the main hall that smelled of pine and old paper. Marcus closed the door and gestured to the chairs facing his desk, but they both remained standing. A wolf thing. Sitting felt too submissive for a conversation between equals, even when one was alpha. I need to ask something of you, Marcus began, his tone careful. And I want you to know you can refuse without any consequences to your standing in the pack. That's an ominous opening, Mira said, attempting lightness while her heart began to race. We're getting a new pack member, a transfer from the Mountain Ridge pack in Colorado. Marcus pulled a file from his desk but didn't open it. His name is Cameron Wolf. He's 56, recently widowed. His mate passed 2 years ago, and he's looking for a fresh start away from the memories. I'm sorry for his loss, Mira said automatically, not understanding yet why this concerned her. He's a skilled carpenter and contractor. We could use someone with his expertise. We've got 3 families wanting to build new homes, and our only builder is overwhelmed. But the thing is, Marcus hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Cameron is having a difficult time. The mate loss hit him hard. He's been isolated, struggling. His old alpha thinks a change of scenery, a new pack, might help him heal, but he'll need support. Someone to help him integrate, show him around, be a friendly face. Understanding dawned cold and uncomfortable. You want me to be his welcome committee. I want to ask if you'd be willing to help him get settled. You know everyone. You're involved in everything. And you have a gift for making people feel at home." Marcus met her eyes directly. "I know what I'm asking, Mira. I know it might be painful to be around someone who's lost their mate when you've never found yours. If it's too much, I'll find someone else. But I thought you'd understand loneliness. Different kinds, maybe, but you'd understand." Mira wanted to refuse. Wanted to say she'd done enough emotional labor for the pack. Enough smiling through her own pain to help others with theirs. Wanted to admit that the thought of befriending a widower, someone who'd had the bond she'd never experienced, felt like volunteering for her own torture. But she was Mira Ashford. Reliable, helpful, always there when needed, Mira. The woman who made things easier for everyone else. "When does he arrive?" she heard herself ask. Relief washed over Marcus's face. "Next week, Thursday. I'll send you his contact information. Thank you, Mira. This means a lot." As she left the community center, the late October wind cutting through her jacket, Mira's wolf stirred with that same restless anxiety that had been plaguing her for weeks. "Something's coming," her wolf insisted. "Nothing's coming," Mira muttered aloud, unlocking her car. "Just another lost soul who needs help. Another person to take care of. Same as always." But her wolf wasn't convinced, and neither, if she was honest, was she. That night, alone in her small house on the edge of pack territory, Mira stood at her bedroom window and stared at the full moon, hanging heavy and bright over the dark forest. 53 years old. 30 years past the age most wolves found their mates, long past hope, long past expectation. She'd given up, really, truly given up. So why did her wolf keep insisting that everything was about to change? Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth, one of those October days when autumn forgot itself and summer made a brief, golden return. Mira stood in the driveway of the small rental house on Maple Street, checking her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Cameron Wolfe was late. Not dramatically late, only 15 minutes, but enough to make her anxiety spike. She'd spent the past week preparing for this meeting with the same meticulous attention she brought to everything. Cleaning the rental house, top to bottom, stocking the kitchen with basics, preparing a welcome packet with maps and local business information, and rehearsing the speech she'd give about Riverside and the pack and all the resources available to help him settle in. She was prepared for every scenario except the one that actually happened. The truck that pulled up wasn't the moving van she'd expected, but a well-worn Ford F-150, dark blue with Colorado plates and a cap covering the bed. It looked like it had seen a lot of mountain roads and carried a lot of tools. Practical, sturdy, real. The man who stepped out made Mira forget how to breathe. He was tall, easily 6'2", with the broad-shouldered, lean-muscled build of someone who worked with his hands. His hair was silver gray, thick and slightly too long, touching his collar. His face was weathered in a way that suggested years of outdoor work, with lines around his eyes and mouth that spoke of laughter now absent. He wore jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with the small scars of a lifetime of physical labor. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. They were the color of aged whiskey, amber brown with gold flecks, and when they landed on her, something electric shot down her spine. Her wolf, silent and dormant for 30 years, suddenly roared to life. Asterisk mate, asterisk no, that was impossible. She was 53, this didn't happen at 53, this didn't happen after 30 years of waiting, this didn't... Cameron went absolutely still. His nostrils flared, his eyes widened, and his entire body locked into rigid attention. For a moment, neither of them moved, frozen in the driveway like two people who'd just witnessed something impossible. And then his face crumbled. It wasn't a subtle change. It was devastation, raw and immediate. His eyes filled with tears, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jump, and his hands curled into fists at his sides. He looked like a man who'd just been shown everything he'd ever wanted and told he couldn't have it. "No," he whispered, the word breaking. "No, not this. Please, not this." Mira's wolf whimpered, confused and hurt by the rejection, but her human mind understood with cold, crushing clarity. He'd already had his mate. The universe had given him that bond, that connection. And she was his second chance, his consolation prize, the inferior replacement for what he'd lost. She wasn't his first choice. She was his leftover. Something inside her that had been barely holding together for 30 years finally shattered. "I'm Mira," she said, her voice steady through sheer force of will, honed over decades of hiding pain. "Mira Ashford. Alpha Marcus asked me to help you get settled. This is your rental house. The keys are inside on the kitchen counter. There's a welcome packet with maps and information. If you need anything, my number is in there." She turned toward her car, moving on autopilot, desperate to escape before she broke down completely. "Wait." His voice was rough, strained. "Please wait." Every instinct screamed at her to ignore him, to get in her car and drive away and pretend this hadn't happened, that the universe hadn't played its cruelest joke yet. But 30 years of being helpful, of putting others first, of never making scenes or causing problems made her stop. She didn't turn around. "What? He seemed to struggle with words. "I didn't mean, that's not, Christ, I'm handling this badly." "You don't have to explain," Mira said, still facing her car. "I understand. You had a mate, a true mate, and now the bond is trying to give you me, a replacement. It's not what you wanted, I get it." "That's not," he made a frustrated sound. "Can you please look at me?" "I'd rather not." "Mira." The way he said her name, soft and broken and full of something she couldn't identify, made her wolf whine. "Please. I'm sorry. I reacted badly, but it's not what you think." Against her better judgment, she turned. Cameron had moved closer, not crowding her space, but near enough that she could see the genuine anguish in his expression. Up close, he was even more devastating. The mate bond, now recognized, hummed between them like a live wire, pulling at something deep in her chest. "I loved my wife," he said quietly. "Diane. We had 32 years together. She died of cancer 2 years ago, and losing her nearly destroyed me. I've spent 2 years learning to exist in a world where she's not here. 2 years putting myself back together piece by piece. 2 years accepting that I had my chance at that bond and it's gone, and I'll spend the rest of my life alone." Mira's throat tightened. "So why are you upset about a second chance?" "Because it's not fair to you." His whiskey gold eyes held hers with painful intensity. "You feel it too, don't you, the bond? Which means you've been waiting. God knows how long you've been waiting. And your mate bond activates for me, a broken widower who loved someone else first, who's never going to love you the way I loved her, because that's not how it works when you've already had that once." His voice cracked. "You deserve to be someone's first choice, their only choice, their once in a lifetime, not their second act." The words were meant kindly. She could see that. He was trying to be honest, to acknowledge the unfairness of their situation, but they carved her open anyway. "You're right," Mira said flatly. "I do deserve that. I deserved it 30 years ago when I was 23, and certain the bond would come any day. I deserved it at 30 when I was still hopeful. I deserved it at 40 when hope started dying. But here we are. I'm 53, you're 56, and apparently the universe has a sense of humor. She pulled her keys from her pocket, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. I'm going to go. Give you space to settle in. If you need anything, groceries, directions, help finding things, my number is in the packet. You don't have to. We don't have to do anything about this. The bond. We can just ignore it. I've gotten very good at ignoring things. Mira, welcome to Riverside, she said, and got in her car before he could say anything else. She made it 3 blocks before she had to pull over, her hands shaking too hard to safely drive. She sat in the parking lot of her own bookstore, closed for the day, and let herself fall apart in a way she hadn't allowed in years. 30 years. 30 years of waiting, of hoping, of secretly believing that someday, somehow, her mate would find her. And when it finally happened, when the bond finally activated, it was with a man who saw her as a disappointing consolation prize for what he'd lost. Her wolf howled inside her, confused and hurt and desperate to go back to him, to make him understand that they could be good together, that second chances mattered too. But Mira knew better. She'd learned over 3 decades that wanting something didn't make it real, that waiting didn't guarantee arrival, that some dreams stayed dreams. She'd given up on finding an alpha mate, and even now, when the bond had finally appeared, she was still, somehow, alone. For 2 weeks they avoided each other with the skill of people determined not to acknowledge the impossible thing connecting them. It wasn't easy in a pack the size of Riverside. Barely 300 wolves, most of them knowing everyone else's business. But Mira had spent 30 years perfecting the art of being present without being noticed, and Cameron, grieving and withdrawn, was apparently skilled at maintaining distance. They managed not to cross paths until the pack work day. Once a month, Riverside Pack gathered for community maintenance, repairing shared buildings, clearing trails, preparing the community center for winter. It was mandatory unless you had a damn good excuse, which neither of them did. Mira arrived early, as always, and was assigned to the food tent, also as always. She'd learned that staying in the kitchen was the safest place for someone unmated. Useful, necessary, but not requiring close proximity to pairs working in synchronized harmony that reminded you of everything you lacked. She was arranging sandwich supplies when his scent hit her like a physical blow. Pine and sawdust and something uniquely him, earth after rain, wood smoke, amber. The mate bond sang in recognition, her wolf surging forward desperately, and Mira had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. "I didn't know you'd be here." Cameron's voice came from the tent entrance, rough and careful. "It's mandatory." Mira didn't turn around, focusing intently on precisely aligning lunch meat packages. "I'm always here, food tent, same place every month." "Right." A pause. "I've been assigned to the construction crew. We're rebuilding the storage shed behind the community center. Marcus thought it would be a good way to showcase my skills, help me integrate." "Good, that's good." Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "You should go. They'll be starting soon." Another pause, loaded with everything they weren't saying. "Mira." His voice was closer now. He'd stepped into the tent. "We can't avoid each other forever. This is a pack. We're going to see each other." "I know that." She finally turned, keeping her expression neutral, a skill perfected over decades. "I'm not avoiding you. I'm just giving you space, like you wanted." Something flashed across his face, guilt, pain, frustration. "That's not what I—" He stopped, ran a hand through his silver hair. "Can we talk? After today's work, just talk?" "Why?" The question came out harder than she intended. What's there to talk about? The bond activated. You're not interested. I understand. We're both adults. We can exist in the same pack without making it awkward. It's already awkward. Then let's make it less awkward by not forcing conversations neither of us wants. What makes you think I don't want to talk to you? Cameron. Mira met his whiskey gold eyes directly, letting him see her exhaustion. You made it very clear when we met that I'm not what you wanted, that I'm a second choice you never asked for. I'm not going to beg you to accept a bond you resent. I've spent 30 years being okay alone. I can keep being okay alone. You don't owe me anything. That's not, his jaw clenched. You're twisting my words. Am I? You literally said you couldn't love me the way you loved your wife, that I deserve to be someone's first choice, not their second act. Those were your exact words. I was trying to be honest. And I appreciate the honesty, really. It's better than false hope. Mira returned to her sandwich supplies, the conversation clearly over as far as she was concerned. Go help with the shed. I'll be here if anyone needs food. She felt him hesitate, felt the weight of words he wasn't saying. Then his footsteps retreated, and she was alone again with the lunch meat and her traitorous wolf, who kept insisting they'd made a terrible mistake. The workday proceeded with agonizing slowness. Mira made sandwiches, refilled drinks, chatted with pack members who stopped by for snacks, and did not, absolutely did not, allow herself to look toward the construction site where Cameron was working. She heard about him, though. Hard not to when everyone was talking about the new guy. He's incredibly skilled, Marcus told his mate, Sarah, during their lunch break. The shed is going to be twice as nice as we planned. He's got ideas for efficiency I never would have thought of. And he's handsome, Sophie's mother, Jessica, said to her friends with the kind of tone that suggested she was already mentally matchmaking. Silver Fox energy, some woman is going to snap him up fast. I heard he was widowed, someone else contributed. Tragic. But he seems to be doing okay, quiet but friendly enough. Mira made herself invisible and listened and felt the mate bond writhing in her chest like a living thing demanding attention she refused to give it. Late afternoon, as people were packing up and the work was concluding, Eleanor Chen appeared at the food tent with her uncanny sense of timing. Walk with me, child, Eleanor said, not a request. They walked the perimeter of packlands, Eleanor moving slowly but steadily with her cane, Mira matching her pace and waiting for whatever wisdom the old wolf had decided to dispense. You've found your mate, Eleanor said finally, not making it a question. Mira's step faltered. How did you? I'm 97 years old. I've seen enough mate bonds activate to recognize the signs. You've been heartbroken for 2 weeks. He's been avoiding the pack social areas like they'll bite him, and the two of you looked at each other across the work site today like you were trying to memorize something you weren't allowed to keep. Tears burned Mira's eyes, but she blinked them back. His mate died 2 years ago. He loved her, and I'm not her. No, Eleanor agreed, you're not. You're you. That's the problem. Is it? Eleanor stopped, turning to face her with those sharp, ancient eyes. Tell me, Mira, when you dreamed of your mate all these years, what did you dream of? The bond itself, or the person? I don't understand. Did you dream of the mystical connection? The scent, the recognition, the cosmic certainty? Or did you dream of having someone to share your life with? Someone to wake up beside, to laugh with, to build something with? Eleanor's gaze was penetrating. Because those are different things, child. The bond is magic, but love is work. He already did that work with someone else, and now his work is different. Learning to love again after loss, That's a different journey than first love, but that doesn't make it less valuable, doesn't make you less valuable. Eleanor reached out, patted her hand with gnarled fingers. You've spent 30 years believing you were forgotten by the moon goddess. Maybe you weren't forgotten. Maybe your mate was living a different timeline, one where he needed to learn certain lessons before he could meet you. Maybe the goddess knew exactly what she was doing, giving you both time to become who you needed to be for each other. Or maybe I'm just what's left when his real mate is gone. Only one way to find out, Eleanor said. Talk to him. Really talk. Not the conversation where you protect yourself by pushing him away, but the conversation where you're both brave enough to be honest about what you want. What if what he wants isn't me? Then you'll know, and you'll move forward, but at least you'll know. Eleanor squeezed her hand gently. 30 years is a long time to wait, Mira. Don't waste the answer by being too afraid to ask the question. Mira stood outside Cameron's rental house at 7 p.m. on a Saturday, clutching a casserole dish and seriously questioning every decision that had led her here. She'd spent 3 days thinking about Eleanor's words. 3 days of her wolf prowling restlessly, demanding they talk to their mate, demanding they stop being cowards. 3 days of remembering what it felt like to have hope and being terrified of feeling it again. Finally, she'd baked a casserole, because bringing food was safe, was normal, was something she'd do for any new pack member, and driven here before she could talk herself out of it. She knocked before she could lose her nerve. Cameron opened the door in jeans and a worn t-shirt, bare feet, his silver hair damp like he'd recently showered. He looked surprised, then wary, then something softer she couldn't quite name. Mira? I brought food. She thrust the casserole at him like a shield. Chicken enchilada. I know you've been settling in and probably haven't had time to cook much, and I always make too much anyway, so I thought... She was babbling. She made herself stop. Can I come in to talk, if you have time? If not, that's fine. I can... Please come in, Cameron interrupted gently, taking the casserole. I'm glad you came. I've been wanting to talk to you, but wasn't sure if you'd want to see me after everything. She followed him inside. The rental was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, an open kitchen living area, but he'd already made it comfortable. Tools organized neatly in one corner, a few personal items arranged on shelves, the scent of fresh wood suggesting he'd been working on something. I'm making built-in shelves, he said, following her gaze. For books. The previous tenant had that awkward dead space in the corner, and I thought shelves would make better use of it. Hope that's okay. I'm doing it as an improvement, not charging rent back or anything. You're building bookshelves. Mira felt something warm bloom in her chest. You don't even know if you'll stay long term. I know. I like having useful spaces, and books deserve proper homes. He set the casserole in the kitchen, then turned to face her fully. Can I get you something? Coffee? Tea? I've got both. Tea would be nice. They moved around the kitchen in careful choreography, him filling the kettle, her finding mugs, both of them hyper-aware of every accidental proximity. The mate bond hummed between them. Impossible to ignore now that they were in the same space. Finally, with tea steeping and nowhere left to hide, they sat at his small kitchen table. I'm sorry, Cameron said before she could speak, for how I reacted when we met, for what I said. I've been replaying that conversation for 2 weeks, and every version ends with me sounding like an ass. You were honest, Mira replied, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. I appreciate honesty. I was honest about the wrong things. He met her eyes across the table. Can I tell you about Diane? Would that be okay? It wasn't okay, It hurt like broken glass under her skin, but Mira nodded because she needed to understand. We met when I was 24. She was 22. The bond hit us both like lightning. Instant, overwhelming, perfect. We built a life together. I did carpentry, she was a teacher. We had 2 kids, both grown now, with families of their own in Colorado. We had 3 decades of partnership, of friendship, of love that grew deeper every year. His voice grew rough. And then 2 years ago, cancer. Fast, aggressive, unstoppable. 6 months from diagnosis to losing her. "I'm so sorry," Mira whispered. "It broke me," Cameron continued, "completely shattered me. The mate bond doesn't just disappear when your partner dies. It tears away, leaves this gaping wound that never quite heals. For a year, I barely functioned. Worked because I had to. Existed because my kids needed me to. But I wasn't really alive. Just going through motions." He paused, took a shaky breath. Second year was about learning to live with the loss. Accepting that she was gone. That the bond was gone. That I had to figure out who I was without her. I moved here for a fresh start. New place, new pack, new chance to exist in a world where everything didn't remind me of what I'd lost. "And then you met me," Mira finished. "And then I met you, and the bond activated, and I panicked." Cameron's whiskey gold eyes were full of regret. "Because I wasn't expecting a second chance. Didn't think it was possible. And the first thing I thought, the immediate, instinctive thing was, this isn't fair to her. You're standing there, clearly feeling the bond for probably the first time in your life, and your mate is a broken widower who spent decades loving someone else first. That's why you were upset. Not because you didn't want me, but because you thought I deserved better." "Yes, exactly." He reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. "But I said it all wrong. Made it sound like you were a consolation prize when you're not. You're—" He struggled for words. "You're a gift I didn't expect and don't deserve, and was terrified to accept, because what if I can't be what you need? What if I've used up all my capacity for that kind of love? What if you've been waiting 30 years for something I can't give you?" The number hung in the air between them. "How did you know it was 30 years?" Mira asked quietly. "I asked Marcus. After our first meeting, I needed to understand. He told me you're 53. Most wolves find their mates in their early 20s. It wasn't hard to do the math." Mira stared into her tea, seeing 30 years reflected in its amber depths. "I stopped counting somewhere around year 15. Stopped hoping around year 20. By year 30, I'd made peace with being alone. Built a good life. Convinced myself I didn't need the bond to be complete. But you wanted it. I wanted it so badly it hollowed me out." The confession emerged raw and honest. Watching everyone else find their mates. Celebrating their happiness while dying inside because I knew it would never be me. Wondering what was wrong with me that the moon goddess overlooked. Trying to be okay with being everyone's helper, everyone's friend, everyone's aunt, but never anyone's mate. She finally looked up, met his gaze directly. "So, yes, when the bond activated, I was devastated by your reaction. Because it felt like even when I finally got my chance, I still wasn't enough. Still wasn't the right choice. Still wasn't—" "Stop." Cameron did touch her then. His hand covering hers on the table, warm and rough and real. The contact sent electricity singing through the bond. "You are enough. God, Mira, you're more than enough. The problem isn't you, it's me. I'm terrified of failing you, of not being able to love you the way you deserve after waiting so long." "I don't need you to love me the way you loved Diane," Mira said, turning her hand to lace her fingers through his. "That was her relationship. I want, if I'm brave enough to want this, I want to build our relationship, something different, something that honors what you had while being its own thing. You'd really be okay with that? With being someone's second mate? I don't know, Mira admitted. I've never done this before. Maybe it'll be hard. Maybe I'll have moments where I'm jealous of what you had with her. Maybe you'll have moments where you miss her so much you can't stand being with me. She squeezed his hand. But I've spent 30 years alone, Cameron. I know what that's like. And if I have a chance, even a complicated, messy, second-choice chance, at not being alone anymore, I think I want to take it. Cameron's eyes filled with tears. I'm 56 years old, and I'm terrified of this. I'm 53, and I'm absolutely terrified. What if we screw it up? Then we'll have screwed it up together, which is still better than being alone. Mira felt something loosen in her chest. Hope, dangerous and bright. The bond activated for a reason. Maybe we're both too old and too broken for this to work the way it would have 30 years ago. But maybe, her voice caught, maybe that's exactly why it activated now. Because we're finally ready for what we actually need instead of what we dreamed of. Cameron stood, still holding her hand, and pulled her gently to her feet. They were close now, close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell his scent, see the silver threading through his hair, and the lines around his eyes that marked a life fully lived. I can't promise I'll be perfect at this, he said quietly. I'll probably compare things to how they were with Diane sometimes. I'll probably have bad days where grief hits me out of nowhere. I'll probably disappoint you in 100 ways I can't predict. And I'll probably have days where 30 years of loneliness makes me doubt this is real, Mira replied. Where I'll push you away because I'm scared of losing this. Where I'll resent that you had something I never got to experience. Where I'll be difficult and prickly and convinced I'm still not enough. So, we'll be a mess. We'll be a mess. Want to try anyway? Mira looked up at him. This man the universe had finally, impossibly given her, and felt her wolf singing with joy for the first time in 30 years. Yes, she whispered, let's try. Cameron smiled, and it transformed his weathered face into something beautiful. Then I'm going to kiss you now, if that's okay. It's very okay. When his lips met hers, soft and careful and full of promise, the mate bond flared between them like igniting flame. It wasn't the explosive first love connection of their 20s. It was something quieter, deeper, steadier, the kind of flame that could burn for decades without consuming. It was, Mira thought, as his arms came around her and 30 years of waiting finally meant something, exactly what they both needed. Asterisk, asterisk. Part 5. The Building. Asterisk, asterisk. 6 months later, Mira stood in Cameron's workshop, which was no longer just his but theirs, since she'd officially moved in 3 weeks ago, and watched him work on a cradle. Jessica's baby shower, she asked, setting down coffee beside his workbench. Yeah, Sophie requested something really, really special for her baby brother. Cameron ran his hand over the smooth wood with the kind of reverence he brought to all his crafts. I'm thinking wolf carvings on the headboard. Very subtle, tasteful, nothing too precious. Mira smiled, leaning against the workbench. You're good at this, the building things, but also the being part of the pack things. People love you. People love you, Cameron corrected. They're just tolerating me because I'm your mate. That's not true. Marcus said yesterday that you're the best thing that's happened to pack infrastructure in a decade. Marcus is biased because I built his kid a custom treehouse, which was incredible, and now every child in the pack wants one. Mira moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her cheek against his shoulder blade. 6 months in, and she still marveled that she could do this, touch him freely, hold him, be held. "We're good, aren't it?" Cameron set down his tools, turned in her embrace and pulled her close. "We're really good. Better than I thought possible when we met." It hadn't been perfect. They'd had difficult conversations about Diane, whose photos still held places of honor in their home because erasing her felt wrong to both of them, about Mira's 30 years of loneliness and the wounds that didn't heal just because the bond had appeared, about how to navigate being older mates in a pack culture that assumed everyone paired off young. There had been hard days when Cameron's grief ambushed him and he needed space. Days when Mira's old insecurities whispered that she was still second best. Days when they'd snapped at each other from stress or exhaustion or the normal friction of learning to share your life with another person. But there had been more good days. Days of waking up together, of morning coffee and evening walks, of Cameron building things while Mira read aloud from books she loved. Days of pack gatherings where they stood together instead of alone. Days of building something neither had expected, but both desperately needed. "Your kids are coming next month," Mira said, both excited and nervous. She'd spoken with Cameron's adult children several times via video chat, and they'd been welcoming, but meeting them in person felt significant. "Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready to show off my incredible mate to my offspring," Cameron replied, kissing the top of her head. "They're going to love you. Lily already asked if you'd help her find book recommendations for her daughter, and James wants to talk to you about starting his own bookstore." "I'm nervous," Mira admitted. "They're nervous too. Their dad's mate died, and they grieved with me. And now I have a new mate. That's a lot to process." Cameron pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "But they know I'm happy. They hear it in my voice every time we talk. They know you're important to me. That's what matters." "I love you," Mira said, the words still new enough to feel precious. They'd waited 3 months to say them, both too cautious, too scarred to rush. But when they'd finally spoken them, it had been mutual, simultaneous, perfect. "I love you too." Cameron kissed her properly, deep and thorough. "Thank you for taking a chance on a broken old widower. Thank you for taking a chance on a woman who'd given up hope." They stood in the workshop surrounded by sawdust and tools and half-finished projects, and Mira thought about how different this was from what she'd imagined at 23. She'd dreamed of explosive recognition, of young love and decades of partnership stretching ahead. Instead, she'd gotten this: complicated, mature, second-chance love with a man who'd loved before and would probably always carry that with him. Love that came after years of loneliness and grief, that had to be built deliberately rather than assumed, that required patience and communication and choosing each other daily. It wasn't what she dreamed of. It was better. Real instead of fantasy, earned instead of given, steady instead of explosive. "Come on," Cameron said, taking her hand. "The cradle can wait. Let's go walk the trails before dinner." They walked their pack's territory as the autumn sun turned the world gold and red, hand in hand, two people who'd each spent decades assuming their story was over, discovering it had simply taken longer to begin. Behind them, in the workshop, the cradle waited, a symbol of new life, new beginnings, and the truth that beautiful things could be built at any age if you were brave enough to try. 1 year later, the Riverside Pack's community center buzzed with its usual monthly chaos, but this time, Mira stood in the middle of it rather than at the edges. She was helping set up for the new members' welcome. 3 young families transferring in, all with small children who'd need the tour and introduction she'd once given Cameron. Aunt Mira! Aunt Mira! Sophie Martinez, now 8 and even more exuberant, pulled at her hand. Can Uncle Cameron build me a bookshelf for my room, like the ones he made you? You'll have to ask him yourself, Mira replied, smiling. He's outside with your dad, talking about the community garden expansion. Sophie darted off, and Mira returned to arranging welcome packets, a task that felt different now that she was doing it as someone who understood how terrifying and hopeful arriving in a new pack could be. You look happy, Eleanor observed, appearing with her usual impeccable timing. Really, truly happy. Not the I'm fine happy you perfected over the years. I am happy, Mira confirmed, which is still bizarre to say. I spent so long expecting nothing that having everything feels surreal. Everything? Eleanor's eyes twinkled. Cameron, the life we're building, finally feeling like I belong instead of just being useful. Mira glanced toward the window where she could see Cameron's silver hair catching sunlight as he laughed at something Marcus said. He proposed last week. We're getting married in the spring. Congratulations. Eleanor squeezed her hand. The moon goddess works on her own timeline. Yours was just longer than most. 30 years is a hell of a long timeline. But look what you both learned in those 30 years. You learned independence, resilience, how to be complete on your own. He learned about love and loss and grief and healing. And now you're both exactly who you needed to be for each other. Eleanor's ancient eyes held wisdom Mira was only beginning to understand. If you'd met at 23, you wouldn't have been ready for each other. The bond knew. It waited until you could handle it. Before Mira could respond, Cameron entered. And as always, her heart did that stupid flutter it had been doing for a year whenever she saw him. He was wearing one of his flannel shirts and jeans, thoroughly himself, and when their eyes met across the crowded room, he smiled. He moved through the crowd to her side, dropped a casual kiss on her temple, still making her wolf purr with satisfaction at the easy affection, and handed her a coffee from the cafe around the corner. Large vanilla latte, extra shot, light foam, he said. Because I know you've been here since 6 a.m. setting up and probably forgot to caffeinate. You're perfect, Mira said, taking the coffee gratefully. I'm really not, but I'm trying to be perfect for you. He glanced at Eleanor. Are you stealing my mate for sage wisdom? Just reminding her that good things come to those who wait, Eleanor replied. Even if the waiting is longer than seems fair. 30 years was definitely longer than fair, Cameron agreed, his arm coming around Mira's waist. But I'm grateful she waited, otherwise I wouldn't have her now. As the gathering continued around them, pack members arriving, children playing, the comfortable chaos of community, Mira leaned into Cameron's warmth and thought about the video she'd seen on social media last week. Some young woman, maybe 25, posting about how she'd been waiting 3 whole years for her mate bond and was starting to lose hope. 3 years. Mira had almost commented, asterisk, try 30 and then we'll talk. But she hadn't, because everyone's timeline felt long when you were in it. What are you thinking about? Cameron asked, reading her expression the way he'd learned to do. Just that if someone had told 23-year-old me that I'd find my mate at 53, I'd have thought they were cruel for making me wait so long. Mira looked up at him. But if they'd told me he'd be worth every single one of those 30 years, I might have believed them. You are, you know, worth it. Even though I came with grief and baggage and adult children. Even though, maybe because of it. I don't know if young me could have loved all of you the way I do now. The complicated parts, the history, the grief you'll always carry. Now, me loves all of it, because it's what made you who you are." Cameron kissed her properly, unmindful of their audience, and the pack, who'd gotten used to their middle-aged mate pair and generally found them adorable, whistled and clapped. "Get a room," Marcus called good-naturedly. "We have a room," Cameron shot back. "A whole house, actually, with excellent bookshelves." The gathering continued into evening, and Mira, who once stood at the edges being helpful but invisible, now stood at the center beside her mate, both of them fully, completely present. 30 years she'd waited. 30 years of loneliness and resignation and believing the moon goddess had forgotten her. But the goddess hadn't forgotten. She'd just been waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right version of Mira who could appreciate what she was given instead of mourning what she'd missed. And when it finally happened, when a 56-year-old widowed carpenter had pulled up to a rental house and their eyes had met and the impossible bond had flared to life, it had been exactly right. Late, yes. Complicated, absolutely. Worth the wait? Every single day. As the moon rose over Riverside Pack territory, full and bright and constant, Mira held her mate's hand and knew with certainty that some stories started late because they needed time to become what they were meant to be. 30 years gone, she'd given up on finding an alpha mate. But this happened. Love, partnership, belonging. And it was better than any dream she'd had at 23.